July 17, 1918. The Romanov family, the last Tsar of Russia, his wife and their 5 children executed in a dimly lit basement in Ekaterinburg, or so we've been told. But what if I told you there's a chance they didn't all die that night? That for decades, sightings, documents, and DNA disputes have kept this question alive. Did Anastasia and Alexei escape the Bolsheviks and vanish into history? We know the official story. The Bolsheviks had captured the royal family after the Russian Revolution. For months they were moved from place to place until finally locked inside the Ipatiev house. On the night of July 16th, they were woken, told they were being moved for their safety. Instead, they were herded into a basement. A firing squad entered. Orders were read. Then, chaos. Bullets ricocheted off walls and the family's diamond-stitched clothing. Smoke filled the room. When it was over, the Bolsheviks claimed every Romanov was dead. But here's the first crack in the story. For years after, the Soviets refused to reveal where they buried the bodies. And when remains were finally found, they weren't complete. For more than 70 years, the Soviet Union insisted that the Romanovs had been dealt with. End of story. But what they never told the public was where the bodies were, or why they waited until after the USSR collapsed to reveal anything at all. In 1991, an amateur archaeologist stumbled upon a shallow grave near Ekaterinburg. Inside were 9 skeletons. The arrangement was chaotic, bones mixed, charred, some showing signs of acid damage. It was clear someone had tried to make identification impossible. And yet, 2 bodies were missing. Not just any 2, Anastasia, the 17-year-old youngest daughter, and Alexei, the hemophiliac heir to the throne. Soviet records later revealed an order: 2 special bodies to be buried apart. No explanation, no follow-up, just that chilling phrase. Even more suspicious, some Bolshevik guards gave conflicting accounts. In one deposition, a guard claimed, "When we loaded the cart that night, 2 were not there." Another swore he saw a girl with her hair in braids led away before the executions began. Were these simple misrememberings from men in chaos, or cracks in a cover-up? If the missing bodies were truly missing, where could they have gone? That's where the sightings begin. The most famous involves a woman pulled from a Berlin canal in 1920 after a suicide attempt. She refused to give her name for months. Eventually, whispers began among Russian émigrés. This was Anastasia Romanov. She had scars in the same places Anastasia was known to have. She spoke fluent Russian with the accent of the court. She remembered the names of obscure palace servants, people no outsider could possibly know. She called herself Anna Anderson. For decades, she lived under that name, fighting in courts to be recognized as the princess she claimed to be. Some relatives swore she was genuine. Others denounced her as an imposter and opportunist. But Anastasia wasn't the only one who reappeared. In rural Canada, an aging immigrant named Vasily Filatov drew quiet attention. He limped from an old leg injury, just like Alexei's, and avoided speaking of his past. But locals recalled drunken evenings when he'd talk about gold halls and a palace far away. One night, he reportedly told a farmer's wife, "I was supposed to die twice." Were these desperate pretenders chasing a royal fantasy? or survivors bound by a shared secret.
To understand why Anastasia and Alexei might have been spared, we have to step back into the politics of 1918. Russia was in chaos. The Bolsheviks were consolidating power. Germany, though battered by World War I, was still a force to reckon with, and they had leverage. Empress Alexandra, wife of Tsar Nicholas II, was born a German princess. Her relatives in Berlin were influential, and some had the means to negotiate or ransom. Imagine the value of two living Romanovs. To the Bolsheviks, they could be bargaining chips, insurance policies, or even propaganda tools. There are whispers of telegrams between Moscow and Berlin, hinting at two living assets being moved west under secrecy in late 1918. These records, cited in pre-World War II intelligence reports, vanished from Soviet archives in the 1930s. Why erase them unless they revealed a truth the regime wanted buried? In 2007, nearly 90 years after the executions, a second grave was found less than 200 feet from the first. Inside, two skeletons, badly burned. Official forensic tests declared them to be the missing Romanovs, Anastasia and Alexei. The Russian government announced the mystery solved. But not everyone was convinced. Some scientists questioned the chain of custody for the remains. Were they truly the bones found in the ground or replacements introduced later? Critics pointed to odd gaps in the DNA testing process, including missing raw data and an unusual refusal to allow independent replication. Most tellingly, the Russian Orthodox Church, which had canonized the Romanovs as martyrs, still refuses to recognize the remains as authentic. Officially, the Church claims insufficient evidence. Unofficially, some clergy whisper that the truth is more complicated and far more dangerous. Maybe the Romanovs all perished that night in the Apachev house. Maybe the second grave finally put the ghosts to rest. But maybe two frightened children slipped away in the confusion. Maybe they crossed borders under false names, grew up in exile, and died as ordinary people in a world that never knew who they really were. History is built on records, but records can be forged. And when politics, royalty, and revolution collide, the truth often vanishes into smoke. The official story ends in a basement in Ekaterinburg. But the whispers tell of two survivors. And if they were right, then somewhere out there, the Romanovs' bloodline lived on, hidden in plain sight.